9 little monkeys jumping on the bed. One fell off and bumped his head. Mama called the doctor, and the doctor said, "No more monkeys jumping on the bed." 8, 7, 6, 5, 3. Ah! One little monkey jumping on the bed. Monkey fell off and bumped his head. Mama called the doctor, and the doctor said, "All the monkeys are dead." That got really dark. Holy cow.
And with that, welcome to this week's episode of the 800's. I am your co-host, Alex, and you just heard from my lovely co-host, Adam. And also, welcome to Bring a Friend to the 800's month. As you can see, I brought my friend.
And I brought mine.
And good to be back, VS Drake. All right, so let's get into our usual plugs.
Yes, so if you just during pre-show, you heard the melodic tunes of Incompetech. That was Fearless First. We use them for everything. They got super great tunes. You should check them out at incompetech.filmmusic.io. So check them out and download your favorite tunes because they're cool. We have a YouTube channel where we post all these 800's videos as well as our podcast and some other cool little chit chats. You should check that out too. The link is below the video. But if you want to just search for it, it's just DM's Table. So check it out. Also, I'm a big fan of Audible. I listen to this book on Audible. And you should too. If you want to join, go to dmstable.com/audible and you get 1 month free to check things out. That also comes with a free book too. So maybe check that out and download our next book, The Arithmetist, and join us for the next week. And finally, we have a Patreon page, DM's Table. The link is also below the video. You should check that out. That's where we learn what you guys want us to read. We do a little vote there, and you guys can vote if you join Patreon. I'm not sure if we have our free vote going on still or not.
No, that would have ended last month, but
Okay. Well, still, you should join. It's only $2 to get your vote in there and some other cool things as well. Plus, we give you a nice little shout out and say, "Hey, thanks for joining." So click the link. Our vote for the next book is still ongoing. You have about a half an hour to get over there, sign up, and tell us what you want us to read if you want to do that right now.
Wield the power.
Yes.
This week on the 800's, we will be discussing the iconic mystery novel, And Then There Were None, by one of the greatest mystery writers of all time, Agatha Christie. On a fateful night, 8 guests arrive on a house on an isolated island. Met by its 2 caretakers, they proceed to settle in. Each has come for their own reasons and have their individual invitations, yet none seem to really know why they're there. The old rhyme, 10 little soldiers, adorns every room. 10 figures sit on a table. By the next morning, there are only 9 of both figures and people in the house. And so the mystery begins!
If this is your first time joining us, I'll give you the quick rundown of how we run the 800's. Essentially, Alex and I think of a subject that we want to discuss. We pitch it. It's usually in the form of a question or topic. Then we talk about it amongst ourselves for a little bit to give you guys a chance to chat it up in the comment section. And if you guys have something you want to talk about, go ahead and throw that in the comment section at any time, and we'll talk about that as well. We love when our chat is very active. I'm not saying Alex is a boring person, but it's more fun when other people join in on the conversation.
Yeah, it had to be me being the boring person.
Well, I wasn't going to say I'm the boring person. Come on.
All right. So our usual little disclaimer, this is a show that is usually not meant necessarily, well, it's not geared towards kids. There will probably be some swearing and such, although we'll try not to rely on it too much. And especially we acknowledge that because this book is a product of its era, we acknowledge that there's bigoted actions, words, and ideas in the story, and the DM's table and all associated shows and publications disdain and do not tolerate the intolerance of people based on any aspect of who they are and what their physical or mental attributes are. Our community is one of acceptance, and we hold our community to the same standards as ourselves. So basically, be nice or fuck right off.
Right on off. With that, let's get right into the conversation. Starting it off just as we always do. Alex and chat, what was your first impressions of the book?
This book felt like so much deja vu. It was ridiculous. And it's not because it was played out in any way, but because I understand that this is like the progenitor of so many TV shows and movies. And I felt like I was reading, I kept getting like flashes of all these other times that I've seen some tropes and stuff. And I realized that they're pulling from this. And that's because it's such a good story. Like it's not long, but it's compelling and interesting, and it was a fun read. Like it was pretty nice. So what about you, Adam? What were your first impressions?
I really liked it. The audiobook is just over 6 hours long, so obviously there's not a lot of time there to really delve into things, but everybody felt really fleshed out. I felt like all the characters were real and had their own personality. And plus the narrator for this book was spot on, awesome. But giving everybody a unique voice and even changing the cadence of everybody's voice just to give that extra layer of reality to it. And this is one of the good examples of why audiobooks are my preferred medium, because it adds that extra cool layer to the story. But enough about the audiobook. I enjoyed the start, and I was really excited for that first murder to get underway and see where it took us. So, yeah.
Well, I super enjoyed. Actually, I read the book physically and listened to the audiobook, and there is a certain element. I think maybe it's the mystery element, but having the different voices kind of lets you sink into that element of it. But when you're reading it, like actually physically reading it, you can spend it feels like you can spend a little bit more time doing like playing the detective, which is something that personally I like to kind of do when I'm reading mysteries. And because you can, well, yeah, there are visual cues and all clues, and also with being able to flip back and be like, oh, I saw this on this page, hold on, let me go back, rather than having to like search through an audio file.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you and Owen.
I feel like that one wasn't I don't know. I picked up on it right away, but maybe that was just repetitiveness from the audiobook, but I was like, unknown. Oh, yeah. But yeah, something that V.S. Drake mentioned, Clue the game. Um, I really, yeah, I am very smart. Thank you, V.S. Drake. um, uh, I felt like this book was reverse Clue. It was Professor Plum in the library with the revolver, but it was Professor Plum dying in the library with the revolver.
Yeah, well, it kind of is. It's almost like Clue, but there's like a timer on it, and if you don't figure out who it is fast enough, another person ends up in that little folder at the end.
Yeah.
But it does have that same kind of suspense, and I like V.S. Drake's comparison to William Shakespeare, where like, what isn't there? Is something out there like nothing in this world is original anymore.
Yeah.
Because when you have people like Agatha Christie and William Shakespeare doing such a good job of storytelling, what's left for the rest of us mere mortals.
Although I was like, I forget who said it, but there's something about like every novel is the same 26 characters repeated over and over in unique ways that essentially fill you with chemical responses that make you happy. Agatha Christie really nailed the chemical responses of those 26 characters for this one.
And that's for sure. So, on that note, what types of like character tropes did she really nail? Did you feel like were some of like the characters that you see over and over again that she really like quintessentially portrayed?
That's a good question. So the immediate two that come to mind was the inspector and the judge. I personally think they were really well played out as like people in authority and people who felt like they should be the ones making decisions. I feel like that those two characters both had like that same I should be the one dictating what we do personality, and yet they were both very different and went about it in a much different way. Obviously, one more so than the other because somebody was pulling strings, but um, yeah, definitely. I think you had that very controlling character in there, and I really liked that. What about you?
I actually am going to agree with both you and VS Drake. I really liked those figures of authority. So the judge and the doctor, they kind of take those like positions of like at least societal and mental authority just because that's what their positions allow them for. But then you've got that overly ambitious gun-toting wild card in Lumbar.
Yeah.
Like that was pretty quintessential there. I mean, obviously there's some characters we don't get to know quite as well because they were off sooner rather than later. They had the sketchy help in Thomas Rogers.
Yeah.
Like he really gave off that vibe, and his wife gave off the like I'm kind of in it with him, but like kind of not. like unfortunately, like the tag along on that, and then the overly like poor at his job policeman in Bloor was like just like the bloated like what we would consider like the donut eating captain who's like sits at his chair and he's just a little bit corrupt because he's been in the system too long and he can't beat it anymore type of thing.
Yeah.
like and that's a good way to put it. VS Drake Lumbar was the predator. I mean, he was a hunter by his very nature. So
I really liked the parts where he refused to give up his revolver. That was so interesting because like you could really feel that tension where he warred with himself between understanding that it was for the sake of everybody's safety in case he's the psychopath and wanting the revolver for his own protection because he knows he's not the psychopath.
well, and I think when you have that certain instinct in it, like based on like what you do, you kind of I don't know, there's probably like some semblance of a sense of like I feel like that killing intent and, and like I'm just slowly hunting it down, But I actually do like VS Drake's comment about the pinning the judge early on because I too pinned the judge. It was the judge, and for me, and why don't we throw this out to chat? Who was your first suspected murderer? Like the first single person that you were most suspicious of from the very beginning? Mine was the judge, and secondary was the doctor. Again, because they fit these certain tropes.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like the doctor they're both in positions where you can understand how they could be so calm in such a fucked up situation. But like at the same time it was just felt a little too calm. You know, the doctor obviously used to like these traumatic situations and just working with them, and he was at least a little freaked out. The judge was just like nothing.
Yeah.
There was like none of that. Like I feel like if this was like a movie, he would have been sitting there with a monocle going, "Oh my," and that's it.
Via Strake, I'm really curious what made you think Vera was the killer? Um, I personally ruled Vera out pretty early on, but for me, my initial suspect was the butler because it was just too obvious that it was him, right? Like he fit too well, and I was like, nah, he's above suspicion because he's too good of a match. Therefore, it's him. But obviously, that was wrong. When
I,
when he, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I like that you and V.S. Drake had the same thought about somebody being too obvious, but they were two different characters, you
Yeah,
know. But like that's I think what Agatha Christie did a good job of doing is making some people seem too obvious when they both were technically, but Stormy thought the first guy who died was their prime
yeah,
suspect.
Tony.
Faked it. Hey, Stormy got that part right. That trope of like the person dying to cover their tracks early on. You know,
So
so
for me, when I thought it was the butler, when he died, I went to the judge. I was like, it's got to be the judge. He's got the mental wherewithal to do it. He's got the commanding presence. It's got to be him. And then he dies. And I was like, well, okay, it's Vera because she's off her rocker. And then I forget who dies. Let me look at this. When the doctor was supposedly dying, I was like, it's nobody who's left. I overlooked somebody. Somebody's not dead.
yeah, I held on to the doctor for a little bit because like it wasn't that bad of an idea to hold on to him as a possibility because he was unintentionally working with the actual killer.
Yeah.
And well, because I was just like, either it's not just one person, because there was a time where I thought they were a duo, you know, like the doctor checks the other person to make sure that they're dead and nobody really knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my thought is like, because the doctor checked basically everybody. Was he working with somebody? And it turns out he was working with my first and highest uh, suspect, and that was Justice Wargrave.
Yeah, via Strake, the whole no gunshot was heard thing. I thought I had missed something because I was like, nobody heard a gunshot. Like, isn't that suspicious? Isn't that weird? I was like, I just must have missed something because I obviously was preoccupied or something. So I'm kind of bummed that I thought that when that was the giant clue that it was him.
Well, they also tried to explain it away. The wind was howling, people were yelling, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's a gunshot in a
Yeah.
house. Like,
I mean,
unless they knew to muffle it with a pillow back then.
yeah. But like even so, revolvers back in that time were crazy loud.
Well, and if you tried to muffle a pillow back then, you probably would be having feathers all over the place. That is a
Yeah,
good point. So,
I uh I found some of the deaths fantastical, but um like I forget which one Wargrave killed when he was on the patio, but like how in the hell did he manage to not get seen when there were that many people just wandering around the house and he was just on the patio the whole time? Like seriously, nobody managed to see him? Like that part was like only in a novel does that work.
well, at that point, I was like, my mind went to Scooby Doo. Talk about another thing that pulls directly from this shit. Like, obviously, they're not dying, but there's a lot of characters and tropes that Scooby Doo pulls like right out of this.
Yeah.
But I was thinking like, oh, there's got to be like a hidden doorway, like they bring up at the very end of the book or something, you know, where it's made for servants to come in and out without being noticed or whatever, and they're
Yeah.
just using that to get in and out, and there's probably something along those lines going on there, so that was my explanation for why that probably happened. But yeah, it did feel a
Yeah.
little, I'll admit, it did feel a little flimsy.
V.S. Drake, I had that thought for a second as well, that the butler or somebody had somebody who looked very similar to them, and they were just sneaking around the island. Something I thought, obviously it's a book, so we don't know for sure, but like, wouldn't the killer just be able to like circle the house while they're searching the island and always stay out of sight?
I mean, presumably, it's hard to tell for sure though. Like, because we don't have like a layout of this house. It might be one of those things where it's like just enough up above certain things to be able to see field of vision wise, or just that there's too many unpredictable parts. Like if they're circling the island, what if somebody gets tired, comes back or whatever, and you're still circling the house and you miss them or whatever? It might be a big
Yeah.
enough house that you can't circle it and also keep tabs on the people, whatever the case may be. Like there's, I like the way that it was written, because there are other possibilities for how things could have been done, but I don't know, it felt satisfying the way it was done, you know.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so on that note though, who's, other than the one that stood out as one that you thought was the most fantastical, whose death intrigued you the most? That is true, VS Drake. That epilogue was super important.
Yeah.
It was a
I
nice.
will
Go ahead.
real quick aside, I will admit, like, at the point of the epilogue, I was scratching my head like, all right, who the fuck did it? I knew it wasn't Vera, and she wasn't having like blackout spells or something, but I really didn't know who it was at that point. So yeah, epilogue was super important. um, I, in terms of deaths, I really liked the last two because, well, I mean the last two. Obviously, Wargrave died last, but besides his,
Yeah.
um, Vera and Lombard, I liked theirs because Wargrave didn't do it himself. He got them to kill. Well, he got Vera to kill the two. And for me, that's always like the most, this is gonna sound bad, impressive murder is not when you just overpower somebody and kill them, but when you trick them into killing or killing themselves.
Yeah, those were definitely up there for me. I am basically with VS Drake, and that Emily Brent was the one that got me for very similar reasons to what you were talking about, Adam. Is that there wasn't an overpowering; it was just kind of a, got to him right at the right time, uh, and used smarts to be able to, mimic something that otherwise wouldn't have happened. Like you're not going to rely on anaphylactic shock to take somebody out. So what's the next
Yeah.
closest? What's the next closest thing? So like that one to me, it like really stuck. It just stuck with me because like this person is doing everything they can to get this as close as they can to the poem, and that was the one that really stuck out because the rest are like, yeah, that wasn't too hard to get that to happen. Like, but that one was just like, oh man, they were really going for this,
Yeah. I will say this is kind of related, but I was disappointed that the doctor wasn't suspicious of Wargrave's fake death plan. Because to me, when I read that part about how he faked his death, my immediate thought was, if he wasn't the killer, wouldn't the killer immediately be extremely suspicious because he didn't kill somebody and somebody's dead?
Well, I think that's the whole point, is to throw, like, that was the whole plan, is to throw the killer off their game by having somebody, freak out,
Well,
like,
he worded it like he wanted to be able to sneak around and watch, but like,
yeah, that is a little iffy, but like, uh, yeah, via Strike, we're talking about the fake death, not the, like, nobody died after him, but like,
yeah,
uh,
the time when he died as a judge, not the time when he died as a dead body on
psychopath.
it. Yeah.
Oh man. That is a good point, Stormy. It was a little, we say funny, it's morbid funny that there's always somebody who just died when they're like, everybody stay together. Poof, gone. One more down.
Immediately separate and die.
Oh man, don't split the party.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think the doctor was very rattled. I'm gonna blame that on the fact that he missed some pretty obvious it's Wargrave clues. Like I feel like Wargrave could have never done that with the inspector. The inspector would have been like, you're mighty sus, dude. How about it's you and get away from me, you know?
Oh man. Yeah, that's, I really don't know, like, what I would have done in that situation for sure. It's hard to I guess that's a pretty good question. What would you do if you were one of the 10?
That is a good question that I actually have an answer for.
I want to hear this. Adam's been planning for this for years.
So one thing they made very apparent is everybody's safe in their bedroom. Yet nobody, the one lady talked about it, but nobody locks themselves in their bedroom and waits out the storm.
Yeah.
Like they have the food, go down to the kitchen, grab a week's supply of food, lock yourself in your room, and call it a week, you know?
I wonder how much of that is determined by things like not just food, but like water availability, like, because at the time, infrastructure wise, I don't know what they have on that island for sure, but like perishables are probably a lot more perishables. Like a week's worth of food might be a bit difficult, but
It, I mean, it made it sound like they always plan for about a week due to the potential for storms making the island isolated. So they definitely had at least a week's worth of food for everyone.
Yeah, that would have been my strategy too. I had the same thought. I was just like, that lady, the Baron's got the right idea. Just hold the fuck up, don't leave. But then they're just like coaxing each other out of the rooms.
Yeah.
Like, I
And then
must
like
go.
she has that thought, and then the two guys come back, and she's immediately like, "Guess I'll leave." You know, like, "Oh man, lady, no, stay in your room."
All right. I do also want to talk toy soldiers, like
Yeah.
Storm Rain mentioned. That's a fun little addition to it. So the toy soldier aspect, I thought, was like, I started profiling the potential killer as soon as like this started, and I'm like, okay, clearly this person is very full of themselves, because they chose somewhere where they would have to be isolated with the people.
Yeah.
And they put clues out everywhere, and it was like they want to see something play out. And like, this person is so freaking full of themselves, like having these little toys out there, and like not only taking the time to murder these people, but taking the time to make sure that a toy disappeared every time too.
Yeah.
And like, the balls to do that and not have somebody just watch, Like it very much makes me wonder is like what happens if you like just take everybody and sit in the room with the dolls. Like
Well, I think Wargrave's practical enough to stop doing the doll trick, right? I think that was him thumbing his nose at his guests. His way of saying, "You're utterly powerless. I'm treating this like a game. You're nothing but puppets to me." Um, I
yeah.
I really liked it too because it was a really good way for him to say, "These aren't accidental murders. These aren't a bunch of people committing murders. This is one person with a plan, and it is a very specific plan."
Very specific, to keep to that poem. But yeah, it does scream like megalomaniacal and very psychopathic, and it's fun to read about for sure. It's very dramatic and
Yeah.
I guess for a dude who's been it would take the amount of planning it would take though to get that just right. Like imagine sitting down and being like, how do I kill 10 people? Well, one should be easy enough, but the
Well, he even mentioned like he thought of the poem and then was like, how do I kill 10 people like this?"
yeah, it's interesting though. Like, why go to the child's poem? Like a child's poem? Is it like who thinks of that stuff?
Because he wanted to be remembered as one of the great murderers. He wanted Jack the Ripper to go, that's cool.
Good point. Yeah, and that epilogue was epic, really. I mean, especially talk about the flair for the dramatic though. Like he does a note in a bottle. It's a 1 in 100 chance somebody will see this.
He's just got to have that chance to let everybody know that he was the mastermind. I was really surprised that, knowing that he wanted people to know, that he didn't just off himself in some grand way at the end.
I think I think the judge understood that he's clearly a storyteller. Like he has to be to want to put on this show. And one of the things that any storyteller knows is that having a little mystery is good for the brand, and clearly he's just basically it's a drum roll that may never end. But the payoff, if it does, is that's pretty grandiose in and of itself. And it's not very smart if somebody else figures it out, it's not as smart as if you tell somebody that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, got that one from Stormy, so thanks for that. Wants everyone to know how smart he is and that he is a bad mamaja. Right. So one of the things that I briefly wanted to talk about, since this is technically Mental Health Awareness Month, was the portrayal of a character who is clearly schizophrenic on some level in Vera.
I didn't really get that. What makes you think she's schizophrenic?
I mean, the fact that she hallucinates mostly is the big part. It's not extreme, and I think that that's one of the things that it could technically be PTSD, I guess, but the point being is I thought Agatha Christie did a good job of making a character that was mentally ill enough to have done it, but not so off the wall nuts that they had to have done it, And it was fairly realistic. It was a surprisingly realistic depiction of somebody who might be going through mild psychosis, maybe not schizophrenic, but mild psychosis, in that she was mostly functional and fine, except in those rare moments, and when they were, they could be overwhelming for her. And I thought, like, considering that this was written in what, like the 1930s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1939. It was a surprisingly nuanced depiction of mental illness. Like, obviously, wasn't intended, like, it fit the character, what the character needed to be, and that's probably what informed it more than an actual understanding of mental illness. But I thought that was kind of interesting. I was reading it and I was like, yeah, that seaweed really did break her. Like that, instant where there was a trigger.
So that's actually why I thought Vera was not behind things, because she, in my mind, whoever was doing this was very confident in what they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
and Vera seemed like she had way too many regrets, and that it was haunting her too much to be the one who's like, I'm gonna kill people, you know.
That's true, but I also know that back then, dissociative identity disorder, I think they had a split personality essentially, was a much more common type diagnosis than it is today. Like today, it's one of those things where they're not even sure it's actually a thing. It's just an overly maladaptive coping mechanism, as opposed to like an actual psychotic break in your personality. Um, yeah, and I thought for a second maybe that could be like, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of, like, one side is straight up murderer and the other one is just this frail and not so confident woman comparatively speaking. But I dismiss that because maybe it's because I have too much confidence in Agatha Christie as a writer to like fall back on something like that. But
That would have been a good way to complete the last murder, the hanging,
mm-hmm.
I guess, because if she realized that she was the one killing everyone and was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm a monster, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess
There's
I just ruled her out for that reason, but obviously there were arguments against it.
I ruled her out for the reasons that you did. The seaweed was the bigger part, was like the biggest indicator of it. But like the confidence thing it wasn't just in the seaweed incident. Yeah, not you know, there were other little indicators that she at least personally didn't have the confidence to do it, and this was far too methodical. Again, especially with deaths like Emily's, with like something that required a syringe. It was far too clean to be somebody who was psychologically unhinged, you know. So I am really not sure, you know. Anywho, I think we can move. But thank you for indulging that for me. Like I saw an opportunity to bring that up,
Yeah.
just because, for its time, I thought it was a reasonably good portrayal. I mean, again, I think it was more to fit the story than the person, but
So I haven't really asked questions. Let me think of a good one.
yeah, dude.
I've just been excited to just talk about this one. It was a really good story, and I
Mhm.
just like bumming it with the conversation sometimes. But no, who so we've discussed favorite deaths. Was there anybody that you wanted to live, that you hoped would get off the island alive?
Hoped or thought would get off the island alive.
Let's go with both.
Okay, hoped would get off the island alive was Vera. Thought would get off the island alive would have been Lumbar. like I felt bad for Vera, especially after the seaweed incident. I'm like, this girl just needs help.
Yeah.
Like some serious help. And but who I thought it would be, well, character wise, it kind of made sense for Lombard to make it, but at the same time didn't, because he was too big of an asshole.
Yeah.
And the dude who's a giant asshole never makes it.
I will say, like, that ending where he freaking knows that Vera has his revolver. Like, he knows she took it to kill him because she thinks he's the one.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I don't know. At that point, I feel like he knew that it wasn't Vera either. Like, deep down. And for some reason, he thought that he could just stand there and it would be fine, that she wasn't going to kill him. And then she freaking does. You know?
Well, one of the things I will say that this book does point out, and we get a bit more of it in the epilogue, is there is kind of an underestimation of women as a whole in the book, and not just an underestimation, but like when something is wrong with them, there's an overestimation of their wickedness when they do something wrong. Like, because the whole point that we find out in the epilogue is that these people went in reverse order of his judgment of their guilt level, and Vera was the last to die. And like, again, on that mental health note, like clearly if she was guilty of the crimes that he saw, there was something else going on there, but he judged her the most harshly.
Well, she was the only cold-blooded murder. Everybody else was either neglect, accident, or well, I guess neglect or accident.
That's true. Yeah, I honestly, just getting into a little bit of what's in on the chat here, I really didn't want Lombard to make it, because like I was like, dude, he's a giant dick, and I had an issue trying, like, rooting for him, just because like among the people there, I mean, he did have the best. I'll admit, like, aside from not just holding up in his room, he had the best survival instincts, just because of, you know, the type of life he lives. So,
Yeah.
like, beyond the, right up until the very end, like.
So I really thought both Lombard and Vera were gonna make it off. I thought at some point that they would go, like, that thing they had where they were like, all right, one of us is gonna have to kill the other one, obviously. I I was waiting for one of them to go, wait a minute, it's neither of us, just put the gun down, let's just leave. Like, come on.
I was kind of waiting for that too. Like, why are we playing into this? Like that snap into it moment. I mean, obviously there's a reason why Vera didn't, because she was not herself after the seaweed encounter. But like, for him, like, you'd think that the dude would know, like, maybe he's just never come across anything that he couldn't conquer before.
Yeah.
But like, you'd think that a dude would like be able to recognize like when enough's enough,
Yeah. Yeah, Storm, I definitely agree with that. Like, Lombard was definitely not some unfortunate soul who happened upon an unfortunate situation. Like, it's very possible that maybe if you examine his whole life, he's committed actual with his hands murder,
Yeah. Atrocities would be the correct term there. Yeah, it's like I said, I've legitimately actually felt vindicated for hating him as much as I did as a person when I was reading the judge's list of like the crimes that he believed them to be, accused of, and I was just like, all right, I was in the right for hating this effort.
So I will say, when I didn't suspect him, I thought Wargrave had a really good chance of making it off the island,
Mhm.
just because he had a very good wherewithal about him about what the right thing to do was.
Would you say he had good judgment? Ah,
I'm the dad in this chat, all right?
I had to get at least one in there, and you just you lobbed the softball at me.
Yeah. That is one thing, Storm, that I thought we were going to see at some point, was somebody taking things into their own hands. Obviously Vera did near at the very end, but um, that was when she clearly thought that there was no other choice.
Yeah, and of the people to do that, I'm surprised Lombard didn't do it sooner.
Yeah.
Considering that's just like his personality, and the fact that for a little while there, at least he had the gun in hand, you know,
Yeah.
like like I thought if anybody was gonna just like break it up, it would be him. But I don't know, like maybe he was trying to salvage a reputation out of this, like come off the island and be able to live a life without people suspecting him of having murdered 9 other people.
Yeah. Yeah, Via Strike, I'll agree with that. It seemed like a very well planned book. Although I think when writing a book, you can have characters act how you want them to. So you can have characters act the situation that you need to happen, which has always been my point of contention with some novels. I didn't really feel it too much with this one, except for the patio thing that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, yeah, it felt like everybody did things that made sense. And it didn't feel like totally scripted, like go here, stand on the X kind of storytelling.
Yeah, Yesterday makes a good point. It's she really knew how to use her characters and built characters that would realistically do the things that they did. Yeah, could they have done other things? Sure. But like nothing they did was completely unrealistic. There's some parts that were maybe a little maybe like railroadish, but that was pretty minimal. And for such a short story to be able to, like, relatively speaking, this is a short novel, and to be able to bring that all together so tightly, it takes excellent planning. And I think that's one of the things that makes Agatha Christie such a the quintessential mystery novelist, is because of her ability to wrap these things up. I don't know if anybody else has read any of her other books, but they all the ones that I've read, like all 3 of them, have a very similar feel to them at the end, where you're like, yeah, this kept me guessing, but like at the same time, like it allows enough to have a hunch that could be right. You know, it's not like confusingly put together to the point where you would never guess because it was just confusing. There is just enough reasonable doubt at any given point against any given person to think, well, I think it's them, but it still could be somebody else right until the very end. And it is, yeah, there's a reason why, yeah, there's a lot of those copycat type of stories that pull from this, because it works so well, like, don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Via Strike asks, what did you guys think about the introduction of the characters at the start? all at the start. Um, as a person with terrible memory for names, it was really hard, especially in an audio format, for me to remember who was who. Which is why tonight I've been referencing a lot of them by the butler, the judge, the investigator, stuff like that, because I
Mhm.
couldn't remember their names, but I did remember their professions pretty well. Um, Obviously, tonight I have a list of everybody in front of me, so I can remember who's who. But uh, I I took it in and then didn't worry about remembering who was who because I figured it would come up later.
Mhm.
I worried that it would impact my ability to make sound judgments on who done it, but it ended up working out. So, what did you think, Alex?
Uh, I had a very similar experience. I mean, even reading it, I was like going back and making sure that I was remembering everybody. And I wish I would have just let it go because I read it physically first and then did the audiobook second. And I was going back and flipping back and forth. And I really wish I would have just like gone through and just tried to remember, like you said, by their professions and then maybe place the names later on. I thought the introduction was well done, considering how short this book is and how much she needed to pack in early on. But I can see in an audio format how that could be a lot to take in all at once. And what I really like is that she does a great job of like doing some basic foreshadowing in, not only uh like basically setting up the kind of character, and I mean like their person, not like the character like the written character, but like uh the character as in like the type of people that these people were. And she did a good job of foreshadowing like who sucked more than the other person based on the judge's judgments, and I thought that was really good. Like I said, there are parts that were there also to be, ironically, considering one of them was literally died as a red herring. There were some red herrings in there, like vs Drake actually mentioned earlier in the chat, the boatman. Like the
Yeah,
boatman seemed like a sketchy dude. And
yeah, definitely.
so
I
yeah,
I
it
will
was
say,
cool.
like, one thing I really liked about the story is the third person perspective that Agatha Christie used was extremely tasteful in that when she swapped focus in the story, it felt like instantly I knew who we were following without remembering who it was because everybody was written in a very unique way and very true to that person. Um, so the voices really came through really well for each character, which helped with the I can't remember names thing.
Well,
and
yeah.
and Storm, I'm assuming you're asking with your did you solve the audiobook, you're asking if I figured out the solution ahead of time. The answer is no. I did not know who done it by the end. At one point I suspected Wargrave, but um, by the end I was lost. I was like, I have no idea who did it.
At the end of it, I am I had a suspicion. I still suspected the judge because I was just like, there's two, for everybody to have died. I was so convinced it wasn't Vera that I was like, somebody had to have survived. I don't know whose death would have been the most likely to be faked. Um, so there was enough doubt there that I couldn't say I was 100% sure. And part of the reason why there's so much doubt there is because this has been done, like redone rather, so many times and in so many variations that the person who survives, like, that's at the author's whim. They could literally make anybody with the right clue or something die but not die,
Yeah.
depending. And like it could have been like Stormreed suspected somebody gave themselves a poison that mimicked death but didn't actually kill them, or somebody like the judge was shot in the head and not actually shot, or the um maybe the hanging itself was a you know like just a prop. I don't know if you've ever seen, but like there's a, I can't remember the movie, but the guy hangs himself and he has like a metal pipe in his throat so it can't crush his larynx, and he can still breathe while still
Oh
being
yeah.
hung. You know, like there's any number of things you can throw in there that you aren't telling the audience or the readers. So at that, on that level, yeah, I hadn't like 100% figured it out, and I don't think there really is any way to, but that's part of what makes it fun. And the description in the epilogue was very interesting to read from the perspective of a complete psychopath, you know? Like,
Well, he even goes in the epilogue like how you could have figured it out, like what clues there were to find,
mhm.
which I think was kind of a cool way of being like, so you obviously missed some shit.
Yeah. Well, and that's the kind of thing. But one of the things I like that it was that it didn't. It felt condescending, but it was meant to feel condescending because it was coming from a like, ah ha ha ha, I am better than you.
Yeah.
Where so like, but it didn't feel like I was handheld through it either. You know, like this is like basically doing what every villain has ever done in a movie and monologuing, but he was the smart one and did it after he had finished killing everybody instead of monologuing. Is like, I'm almost done with my plan, and then gets foiled, you
Yeah.
know. Like,
Storm, the judge pointing out how everyone could have slipped the cyanide in the drink. Yeah, that actually is what made me think that he was the guilty person, because he immediately took control of the situation and went like, yes, I have the weakest alibi here for all these murders, but that doesn't mean it's me.
yeah, he used the reasonable doubt argument to like BS his way through this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, via Strake definitely, he definitely got a kick out of planning these murders. Um, he talked about in the epilogue about how uh, ordering slash sentencing people to die wasn't enough to fill that need for him, and that he wanted to commit the murder. I think planning it out and doing the thumb his nose at everybody and the little toy soldiers, I think all those were definitely things he did to get that additional adrenaline rush.
All right, I think it's time we start going over our final thoughts. So, Adam, what were your final impressions of this book?
Yeah, I really liked the book. It's definitely a would recommend for me. I don't really have a lot of gripes about it. I've pretty much voiced all my gripes tonight.
All one gripe.
I think I had two. I think there was two in there. There was the nobody ran into him while he left the balcony thing,
Oh
and
yeah, that almost forgot that one.
yeah, whatever the other one was. It's honestly, it was so captivating, and it was exactly what I needed on a very long work week. So, um, no, no doubt about it. I loved it, and I'm really excited to read more Agatha Christie in the future.
You definitely should. She, like, in my experience, does not disappoint. But one of the things I'm starting to learn from this is that one of the reasons why I got out of reading mysteries, because I remember like reading them a little bit more when I was a kid, is like I started being able to predict things, and I realize now that with a good writer, even if there's predictable parts, they're good at throwing in just enough doubt to make it fun. And I think this has really proven to me that I need to give mysteries more of a chance in general. And I know that Truly Devious, the one that we read before this, that even referenced this one, like
Yeah,
just outright referenced this exact book. Um, there is something to be offered in mystery that is timeless, you know. even if you have these tropes and things that you guess, there's just, with a good enough author, they can make it work. And, no one does it better than Agatha Christie, There might be some on her level, but I don't think anybody does it outright better. And via straight to your point, this book is such a classic that actually my cousin actually mentioned to me that he actually read it for school. Like that was like he had to read it for one of his English classes, I believe. So, I believe he was in like watching us at some point, probably got off to do any number of things. I mean, hard to keep teenagers on any Twitch stream for too long.
Wow.
Yeah, I just did that to set up the "we're old" joke. But honestly, this was a great book. I would highly recommend it, and I'm looking forward to reading more mysteries with you all. Like not, So this was thanks for those who voted for this one, and
Yeah, I'm glad we got the opportunity to do this particular mystery novel. So thanks for telling us to read it, guys.
yeah, and if you want to wield that kind of power, you
$2
why don't
a
we?
month. Practically $1 a vote. I mean, because we do 2 books a month.
And other perks.
And among other things.
Yes. So with that, I think a segue.
Yes. So let's talk books for next time. The book we know about for May 22nd, is that right? Yeah, May 22nd, we know is The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. I'd like to take this moment to thank Alpac Phantom for my new books e-reader that he gave me. It's modeling The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson right now. So it's got a really cool cover in case you haven't seen it before. One of my personal favorites. I've read this one before, so I'm really excited to read it again in actual reading format. I will be reading it instead of listening to it this time to see if I get any new takes on it. So I'm really excited about that. But if oops, sorry, gotta make a quick typo change. The vote for tonight ended, and we have the results. Drum roll, please. Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lisa C. Read by June 19. We are going to be skipping a couple of weeks, just one session, because we're all busy people who have kids and summer activities. So we will not be meeting on June 5, but we will be meeting on June 19 to read Sunflower and the Secret Fan. Mm-hmm. Also, next week is just going to be Alex and Alan on screen. It's my, or I have, can't read and walk. I'm busy for the next stream, so you won't get to see my beautiful face, but it will be taken over with Alan. So on the beauty factor, probably a bonus.
Ooh, self-burn. Those are rare.
And some quick plugs for you guys. Visit dmstable.com for all of our information on our podcast and this show and all the other cool things we do. Check out our YouTube channel, YouTube/DMsTable, or however YouTube links work. That's also below the video if you want to just click it there. Patreon is also linked below us. That's also patreon.com/DMsTable. We really appreciate all the patrons that we have on Patreon, and we hope that you guys want to join the ranks. So if you do, check out Patreon link below. We have 2 social accounts that we use, Facebook and Twitter. Those links are down below as well. But on Facebook, we're at the DMs Table, and Twitter, we're at DMs Table. Check us out there. We do book announcements and other cool commentation things. So you should give us a follow and always stay in the loop. Speaking of staying in the loop, we have a Discord chat that we do, just us nerds, book nerds, video game nerds, D&D nerds. Bring it. Join us on Discord. You can hit us up on Facebook or Twitter to get the link. Nerds unite.
All right, and coming up for our themes, this is for May, bring a friend. So we do still have one more book to read through May, The Arithmetist. So if you have a friend who enjoys fantasy, maybe even if they haven't read the book, maybe bring them along so they can get a feel for the DM's table, see if it's something that they might enjoy, say with a book that they have read. So go out there, try and bring at least one other person with you, and bring them around, and hopefully we can help this community grow and keep the chat rolling. It was real fun with the people who are active in chat today, so thank you very much. May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, and with that we are promoting Jasper's Game Day. It is a wonderful organization that raises awareness and resources for mental health, and it does so through tabletop gaming, anything from D&D to Pathfinder to Starfinder. They are actually doing Jasper's Game Week this week. Please give them a visit, and if you connect with their mission statement, I highly recommend that you contribute, whether that is just supporting them financially, or maybe getting in on some of their what sound like really fun events. So they've got Jasper's Game Day coming up this week, so that's today, tomorrow, Monday, and then next week they have Concurrent Online and Origins Game Fair Live on that one's all the way out in September, but they have all sorts of other things there, so give them a check out, and show your support for the increase in resources and awareness of mental health issues. Something very near and dear to my heart, and we'd really appreciate you reaching out to them as well. Now, June was supposed to be our Asian and Pacific Islander Author Month. We are going to follow that up for our June 19th, but we're going to let that roll over into July because we do not want to shortchange the authors of that heritage. So our first book is by Lisa C. So that is our first Asian Pacific Islander author, and we will be making sure that our next vote is still Asian Pacific Islander authors as we roll into July. And with that, I just thank you all for joining us. Special thanks to Alan behind the scenes. I didn't do it at the top of the hour because he made us late. So, but he also made us here, so he had to get his. We're giving him his props now. So thank you very much, Alan, for making this all possible. Seriously, dude, we love you, and I'm looking forward to hosting with you next time. And thank you,
thanks,
everybody.
Alan, for always figuring out our technical issues, getting us rolling despite terrible internet and software problems. Appreciate you, bud.
Yeah, and thank you everybody who joined us. Special shout out to everybody who's active in the chat. Like, it seriously makes this so much more fun. We've had a couple episodes where it's just us, and we love having more ideas and people to contribute to this. So like I said, bring a friend, see if they like it, and we love to expand our community, and can't thank you enough for that, because this has been great.
Yeah, it's like one thing Alex and I really appreciate is differing views and being able to discuss things back and forth and not just rattle off things back and forth to each other, because if we just like talking about books between each other, we probably wouldn't be doing a Twitch stream. It's our followers that are the reason we're in front of cameras instead of just sitting next to each other drinking beer,
Well, it's the pandemic. We would be texting each other drinking beer.
So bring your friends so that they can join in and just really make the culture of the 800s that much richer.
All right.
Thank you to everyone who has joined us already.
Yeah, thank you very much. And with that, we'll see you next book.
Yeah, I'm gonna get back to my little kids book now. Thank you.